So every great company out there needs attention, right? They need awareness of their product and the company brand. No matter how good their product actually is, if nobody knows about them, it really doesn't matter. We all know that the Very Good Butchers, aka the Very Good Food Company, is a great company with a great product. But again, it's still a small company as of yet, and not that many are aware of them. Now this is about to change. Not only because they're working more on their brand awareness, but they're actually working more on social media. And having an interview with YouTube's most busiest man, Meet Kevin. Well, that is sure as heck a good path on the road to recognition. Now, quite possibly you've already watched the interview, and if that's the case, well, you could look at this as a quick recap where I try to point out the most important aspects of the interview. And I do share, of course, some personal insights. And I'm going to try to focus on some things that we're not that familiar with. And if this is the first time that you're on this channel, my name is Jesse. And on this channel, we focus on plant-based companies and stocks. And as always, I would truly appreciate an early thumbs up since it does really help with the algorithm. And if you want to keep getting more information regarding plant-based companies like the Very Good Food Company, Tattooed Chef, or Beyond Meat, to name a few, make sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell button. I really appreciate your help. Now, one of the first things that talked most about was actually the Rupert Facility that is just opened up now in Vancouver. And a really good question from Meet Kevin was, how do you actually expand from being able to produce about 1 million pounds of meat alternatives in a year to going up to about 37 million pounds a year? Now, that's a 37x. How does that happen? And a good answer from the CEO, Mitchell Scott, is that they're on the ramping phase at the moment, running trials every day. And when it comes to staff, they're basically gotten them all in that they need at the moment. And when it comes to the second production line, it's actually going to start up in just a few months, quicker than I believed. But something that did surprise me in this interview is that Scott actually talks about that full scalability of the Rupert facility is from around 6 to 12 months, which that's really quick. Take a look at the video here.
We've got a lot of the staffing in place. I mean, we're running trials every day. We're really starting this scale up process. It's absolutely going to take, a few months. We've got one line in right now. We're putting another one in, in a couple months. I'd expect, 6 to 12 months until we're kind of really fully scaled up and humming along. Wow. Just to quickly touch on capacity. I think we've announced it's going to be, once scaled up, 37 million pounds annually. So it's going to be capable of doing 100 million plus in revenue out of this facility.
So I'm trying to figure out what they mean about full scalability, because as we know, at full scale, when it's at max production anyways, it's 37 million pounds. And is that what he's saying? That within a year, we could see a 37 million pounds production in Rupert facility already? Because that's really quick. Folks, let me know down in the comments. What do you think from that comment? And later on in the interview, they keep talking about what kind of revenues we could see from the Rupert facility. And Mitchell Scott talks about that at least 100 million plus. That's the kind of revenue we could see from that facility. And for me, I kind of wonder, what does that mean, 100 million plus? Is that actually around 100 million in revenue? Is it maybe 110, 150, 200? Or more? That's really hard to know, but I guess we'll find out as we move on. But obviously, it's not enough to just produce 37 million pounds of meat alternative. You have to have the demand. And according to the CEO, they're very confident about the demand, because since day one, they've actually been on waiting lists. Different stores have been on waiting lists trying to get in their product, but they couldn't keep up, right? Now, at this moment, they have about 300 stores where their product is at. But according to the CEO, before the end of the year, this year that is, they do expect to be at about 2,000 to 4,000 stores. Now, they couldn't reveal what stores yet. They can't talk more about the US deal, but still around 2,000 to 4,000 stores. I mean, just imagine the kind of revenue we'll see from that. Now, if we move on to talk about restaurants, when it comes to partnering up with different restaurants, already at this moment, they have about 10 to 15 restaurants in the vicinity of the Victoria facility, the original facility, right? But they're actually looking into moving into larger chains. And they're not talking about mainstream fast food chains, right? They're not talking about going to some kind of burger joint where you can buy a burger for $1 or $2. No, it's got to be a premium product. And that makes sense considering that they have a whole foods approach. It's a better for you product, right? So they want it to be more at the high end. So I actually think this is really exciting news because I had no idea about this. Did you guys? Let me know down in the comments, because if they start moving into a couple of hundreds of restaurants, eventually maybe a few thousands of them, using the same concept as Beyond Meat, being like half of the revenue coming from restaurants and half from stores, I mean, the revenue flows will be immense. And as many of you know, they have their own restaurant and planning to open up a new one soon as well. They're actually planning to open up about 20 flagship restaurants around the world. That means on a global scale, right? Like maybe, for instance, having one in Tokyo, one in London, one in Paris, maybe. And obviously, 20 restaurants isn't a huge deal when you think about some of the companies that's out there. But still, 20 restaurants, even though it will bring in some revenue, but it's supposed to be some form of brand ambassador, as the CEO talked about it. Meaning that when people come into these restaurants and eat their specific products, they'll learn more about plant-based living, but also about their specific product. So this takes us to the next aspect, which is revenue. And they have revenue from different aspects, of course, which is at this moment, it's about 50% from the e-commerce sales. As you know, they're doing really well with that, and 50% from their stores. I guess there are about 300 stores out there. But in the near future, they do expect that to change. It's going to be more about 80-20, so 80% being from stores and then 20% from e-commerce sales, which is still going to be a huge part of the overall pie, right? So talking about stores, when it comes to competitiveness, how do they compete with stores that are cheaper vegan brands, right? Like private label. Well, they aren't interested in private label. They don't want to compete with price. They want to create a lifestyle brand with a range of products that people enjoy, meaning people will actually go to the store with the purpose to find their product. They're a premium provider when it comes to plant-based meats. And to me, that makes sense, right? They do have a better for you product in comparison to many alternative meats, a whole foods approach. So people will more than likely pay more knowing that they will support their own health. So not so much competition on the price, but more related to quality. Their strategy is also to begin in more natural whole food stores where people aren't that price sensitive, and with time move on to larger volume stores like, for instance, Walmart, while making a name for themselves along the path. And then it might be able to sell for a cheaper price, but much larger volumes. It makes sense. And I imagine that they would have been able to cut costs and make the production methods more efficient by then as well. And doing that, their margins will get even better. And another interesting aspect, which I have heard something about that, but they went into a little more detail about it, is gluten-free options in the future. Because as of yet, they don't really have any gluten-free meat alternatives. The main ingredients in their products is something called seitan, which is a wheat gluten protein alternative that they kind of mix, I think, with beans and different vegetables. And people who have sensitivities when it comes to gluten, they won't be able to eat their product then. And that's something they want to remedy. And me personally, I think this opens up a whole other market for them as well, which makes me happy because it makes me think about Beyond Meat. The good thing with Beyond Meat is that their product doesn't contain gluten, which means that it opens up for a lot of those people. But it also doesn't contain soy. And a lot of people today are nervous about soy, whether it's warranted or not. So again, we have to understand that there's plenty of people out there who have gluten sensitivities. But I would say even more people who want to avoid eating gluten because it's gotten kind of a bad rep as of late. But it's not so strange either because, to be honest, a lot of white gluten, so to say, isn't that healthy for you? Considering white pasta, white bread, bakeries of different kinds, they don't really do anything for you. Not in a health perspective anyways. But let's be honest about that too. When it comes to gluten-free alternatives, when it comes to pastries maybe, when it comes to different cookies, pastas, whatever the choice is, a lot of them is actually not better for you. A lot of these products actually do contain more sugar, more additives, so it's not a healthy product just because it's gluten-free. But if you're eating a natural gluten-free diet, like potatoes, rice, quinoa, that's good stuff. But that's the difference also. But personally, I don't think gluten should be a problem if you don't have sensitivities, especially if you're eating whole foods, right? And like whole grain pasta, whole grain bread, and couscous and bulgur, things like that. But Scott highlighted that it is important to him that the company can have some form of accessibility for all kinds of people, right? With all different kinds of sensitivities or choices in life. And again, I do think this will be something that benefits the company in the long term. So one of the things they talked about when it got to the end was the next facility, the next move. And as we know, the next move should be into California, right? To the Paterson facility that we've heard a lot about. The only difference here is that I actually thought, because in different articles, they kind of stated that it probably opened up in May, beginning of summer. But now it seems that they mean that it will be up and running before the end of the year. So I guess these things do take time. In this interview, we didn't get any specifics on how much of a product they can actually create in the Paterson facility. We've heard numbers before in different articles about 98.5 million pounds being able to be produced there on an annual basis. He didn't say anything like that now, but it kind of was hinted that it's going to be a lot more than the Rupert facility, which is 37 million. And Kevin said something like, you will at least double that there. And Scott didn't deny it or anything. So I'm guessing it will be around those numbers, from everything from 70 to 100 million pounds. We'll see. But he did point out that when they have established a presence in California as well, using the Paterson facility, that will be enough for them to be able to supply all of North America and beyond. And I'm guessing he talks about Europe there, right? But if we move on to talk now about long term. An interesting fact here is that we know about the cheese business. And I have speculated about plant-based milk, but he actually said it now, that that's the kind of thing they can see for the future. They want to have maybe 15 different brands of product and grow them over the years, but not necessarily on their own. It could be a collaboration with smaller companies. And now he also talked about going to Europe and opening up a facility there and sell their meat and dairy alternatives. So that is something that I'm really looking forward to and would obviously open up another huge revenue flow. But right now, the big focus is on North America, but they want to be a global brand. Other verticals like dairy, sauces, and ready-made meals. They want to be able to replace all meat products with a plant-based version. Boy, that was a much larger goal and vision that I have heard about by far, and I love it. When the vision is that high, even if you don't reach it totally, you will hopefully still land very high up. And who knows, considering the times we live in, it could be a possibility, especially with a whole foods approach. So if we try to reach a conclusion here, well, we care a lot about revenue, right? That's what we want to see in the future. So if it is actually only 100,000 in revenue from the Rupert facility, which I don't believe actually, I think it will probably be higher than that, but we'll see soon enough. But let's say that it'll begin with in the next year or 2 years with 100 million. What does that actually entail? Well, if we compare it with Beyond Meat, what was their annuals for 2020? Well, that was $400 million in revenue. And thinking about how large Beyond Meat is, right? I mean, on a global scale, the industry leader at about 130,000 locations, restaurants, and stores. Having 400,000 and then maybe the Very Good Food Company in a year to 2 years from now, maybe making about 100, well, that's a fourth of that company. And I think that's incredible. Of course, Beyond Meat will be way beyond that at that point, but still very impressive. And then if we compare it with Tattooed Chef, that is around $1.3 to $1.5 billion in market worth right now. And some people could actually say that it's kind of undervalued for being a growth company. They had a sales of about $150 million now, and they do expect around 200 to 220 for next year. So we're talking quite close to that. And I'm wondering, what could that mean as a market cap for the Very Good Food Company, right? What kind of stock price could we be looking at then? I'm thinking a pretty high one. But yeah, just speculations here. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't think it's that strange that we could see those kind of numbers, like being over 100 million over, in the next year or 2 years, considering that if they're only at 300 stores now, and we don't know their annuals for 2020, but we've speculated, we've talked about what makes sense. Could it be 5 to 7 million? We've talked actually about $10 million, but let's say around 5 to 7. And if they're at 300 stores and they're not that known yet, imagine a year from now when they'll be at maybe 4,000 stores, right? So maybe adding another 10x to those numbers, so 70 to 80, 90, 100 million in revenue makes more and more sense to me. What about you guys? Let me know down in the comments. I'm really interested to hear it. Now, before I wrap this up, I just want to talk a little about Meet Kevin. Now, Meet Kevin is someone I respect a lot, and I do really like his show and what he talks about normally. I mean, this guy is a genius when it comes to money in many ways, but I do find it a bit strange that he actually did this interview to begin with, because just before Christmas, he actually owned stocks in the company, but he sold out after 2 weeks because he felt that we're way too overvalued and he couldn't see the potentials with it. He talked about that in a video, I think from November. And now doing this interview and doing this video, he seemed very bullish, or very positive anyways. And I felt that is really positive for the Very Good Butchers, but it just felt a little weird. But then I realized, of course, at the time, I think it was around October, November, that the Very Good Food Company was around $9 Canadian, right? And at that time, for many people, still today, it seems very overvalued. And imagine then having the double the price it is at today, which means that for several people, it might seem like, well, we can't make a lot more money on this. And so he sold out. But at the same time, is there a chance that he got paid for this interview? I think actually there is a possibility, because there's plenty of people who do that. Don't remember him actually mentioning that it was a sponsored interview, and I think you should do that. And I could be wrong. This is just speculation. But again, it's based on that I haven't heard him being very positive about the company before. But again, does it matter? I don't think it does. This is really great exposure for the Very Good Food Company nonetheless. And that's what we want to see. We want the company to be reached to many more investors out there so they can see the potentials that we see, right? And this will be something that benefits not only them, but us as investors. So in the long run, I'm really happy that Meet Kevin did this interview with them, because he has about 1.5, 1.6 million subscribers. So it's going to make an impact, right? And I think it was a smart and strategic move by Mitchell Scott. Again, it does show what kind of CEO he is. He's a man of action. He walks the talk. He makes things happen, right? Well, folks, that was it for today. I truly hope you got some value in today's video. And if you did, make sure to smash that like button. And if you want to keep getting more information on the Very Good Food Company, Tattooed Chef, or Beyond Meat, make sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell button. As I'm sure you're familiar with now, this is not financial advice. These are just my own opinions and thoughts. Make sure to always do your own due diligence and invest safe. Really hope to see you soon. Peace out.